This episode may contain content of a graphic nature, including descriptions of physical and sexual violence against adults, children, and animals. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi everyone, I'm Tonya.
And I'm Talia.
And we are Crimes and Consequences, a true crime podcast.
Tonya.
How are you today?
Today's a good day. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good.
I would like to welcome everyone back to another exciting episode of Crimes and Consequences.
Woo!
And before I start the story for today, if you have not hit the subscribe or follow button, number one, why not?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know, but if you haven't, please hit that button. It helps us out a lot. So today's episode is about a woman named Ann Hoover. Have you ever heard of Ann?
No, I haven't.
Well, Ann was an all-around pleasant, welcoming soul. I mean, she was a really great person. She was always good for a warm smile and a helping hand. She was talented and beautiful. However, her beauty on the inside was what truly radiated outward and touched everyone around her. She just seemed to have that kind of effect on people. She was always smiling. So others were smiling too when they were in her presence. Anne had a passion for the arts, and she herself was an extremely gifted pianist. Her devotion to music was something she carried with her throughout her life. She attended college and graduated with a degree in music in 1975. Afterwards, she began teaching piano and even worked for the Pittsburg Symphony as a fundraiser.
Oh, lovely.
I know. She wished to share and spread her love of music with anyone who was willing to receive it. She was a very compassionate person who loved animals and was extremely close with her family. I guess you could say she appreciated the beauty in all aspects of her life, and that's how she lived it too.
Aww.
When Anne turned 44 years old, she bought her first home in the South Oakland area of Pittsburg. The area at the time was up and coming, and it was a really nice place to live. It was in transition. It was like on the verge of a renaissance. You know, all of these new people were coming into the neighborhood and they were trying to fix up the houses that had been neglected for a long time. It was this exact opportunity that drew Anne in. She was looking forward to a new phase in her life by fixing up her new home, and, she planned on living in it. She put everything she had into the renovations for her new house, and she didn't have any plans to stop anytime soon. That is, until it was finally perfect for her. Like, she couldn't wait to just rehab the whole house. And at this point in our story, she'd already put a couple of years worth of work into that house, so it was getting close to being that perfect home she envisioned. In the meantime, while she was doing this, she had built many strong relationships with her fellow neighbors, and she quickly became a well-respected member of her tiny community. Anne truly felt like she was really a part of something as she beautified her humble abode and helped her neighbors do the same. The only thing that kind of rained on her parade was the rundown house that she lived next to.
Oh, there was still one that no one was rehabbing.
Right.
It was creepy, old, nasty house
exactly.
next to you.
It was in need of extensive repair. It was neglected and shabby, and that's being nice by me saying that. The roof was missing tiles, doors were broken, some of them were even missing, and the windows were either broken or boarded up or both.
Oh, that would suck.
Right? I know, that would just suck. And, that's just to name a few of the things that were wrong with this hopeless mess that she lived next door to. Anne prayed every day that someone would buy that house and would put as much love and work into it as she did to her own home. She couldn't help but think about what her adorable house would look like next to a newly renovated home.
Instead of a piece of shit.
Yeah, exactly, right? And I have to tell you, these homes, there is no space in between them. They share like a wall. So it's not even like a house with a little bit like a driveway and then another house and then a driveway. No, they were smack dab literally next to each other. Okay, just to give you an idea.
Okay.
I think we've talked about it before. It was like a row house.
Yes.
Okay. So both their front doors faced the same direction. They were exactly the same height. And they came equipped with a set of stairs leading up to each individual door. It didn't take long for Anne's prayers to finally be answered. A man named Roy Kirk bought the shabby house next door. He energetically introduced himself to his new next door neighbor, Anne, and they immediately hit it off. Roy told Anne that he purchased the house as a project that he was going to fix up to perfection and either sell or decide to live in. So maybe he's going to flip it, maybe not. He wasn't sure. He seemed motivated, ambitious, and truly a man with a plan, or at least a vision. She couldn't help but be drawn to her new younger neighbor.
John, physically?
No.
Okay. I'm just wondering.
As part of the community group, she invited Roy along to take part in discussing with fellow neighbors plans for the future and how they could further make their neighborhood beautiful. The steering committee was the perfect place for Roy to bring his big ideas. The purpose of this committee was to band together residents and to help each other and to promote beautification of their residential area. Roy seemed to fit right in with all of the other neighbors. They all seemed to share the same interest in the community to revitalize the neighborhood. His endless supply of energy and genuine enthusiasm was truly contagious. He was excited about what they were talking about and their desire to start to build a community. And that excitement was just so infectious, and it was hard for people not to be swayed by his positivity. Needless to say, there was no doubt that he had really made the neighbors turn an eye to him and obviously left behind a lasting impression. He did such an excellent job firing everyone up during these meetings.
Wow.
I mean, they were like, yeah, we're going to do it. This neighborhood's going to be awesome. I can just see it, right? Okay. His leadership qualities were keenly noted, and the group decided they wanted Roy to head the group and to be president. After all, he had so many ideas for the future. Just a plethora of suggestions for the surrounding neighborhood and big plans for the house he was currently working on next door to Anne.
Even though he might flip it.
Yeah, even though he might flip it, as well as other properties in the same vicinity that he was hoping to acquire. So he had his eye on some of the other homes in the neighborhood. The vote was unanimous. Roy was now the newly elected president of the steering committee.
Lucky Roy.
Yeah.
That's great.
Anne worked with him from the very beginning because, after all, they had the same goal. A desire and passion to bring the Pittsburg area back to what it could be, bring it to its full potential once again. They believed in their little town, and they knew full well it could shine with the best of them. Anne was beyond excited to bring forth the beauty resting just beneath the surface. She wanted to be the one to pull it out.
Okay.
I mean, she was
damn,
fired up. I know.
These people are all about their neighborhood.
I know. I wish I cared that much about my home, right? No, just kidding. Roy went full speed ahead with his renovations, or I should say demolitions. He wasted no time starting on the house. He began ripping out walls. There was rotten plaster and broken beams, and all of that rubbish was tossed into a heaping pile outside the house, which Anne wasn't a big fan of, but it's to be expected when you have any kind of renovation.
Yeah.
And she was aware of that.
It's like when you clean out your closet. It's going to be a mess for a little bit.
Yeah, it's going to be a mess for a little bit before you get everything back where it belongs. But that wasn't really what bothered her. Anne was concerned with the way Roy was carrying out his work, because in her mind, she thought the roof should have been the first project he should have tackled. After all, once Roy waterproofed the house, then he could complete the rest of the work. So that's what made logical sense to her, but that wasn't the first thing he did. She approached Roy and asked if she could recommend him a roofer to sort out the problem he was obviously having trouble with. Roy thanked her but told her he was on a budget and planned to do all the renovations himself. Roy already rented a place nearby, but it was his lifelong dream to own his own house, something to call his own. So to Roy, he was pursuing this dream by rehabbing this house. He was motivated and determined to transform this dud into something that resembled something that truly sparkled, at least something that was well on its way. All the neighbors were impressed by his dedication, and they all got along, well, that is for a while. Anne decided not to poke and pry too much into what Roy had going on renovation-wise, so she left him to do his thing and simply carried on watching the work on the house from a distance. That didn't stop her from worrying, though. Anne was concerned that it wasn't progressing well, and the house was beginning to look worse than when Roy first started working on it just 6 months earlier.
Does he know how to fix houses?
I know, right?
I
mean, you can't just go in and start demolishing shit and
watch
not
some
knowing.
YouTube videos on it. Do it yourself.
Exactly. She thought the repairs were taking way too long. It didn't matter that Roy wasn't a carpenter, nor was he skilled much in that manner to begin with, so he definitely struggled. It was frustrating for Anne that he didn't want or accept any outside help and stubbornly insisted that he could do everything on his own. Anne was always the first one to lend a helping hand and ever so eager to coordinate much needed repairs for him if he wanted, but he really didn't want her help. There were a lot of things that Roy was doing that Anne didn't approve of. For starters, she was sick and tired of him dumping junk in his yard. It just made the area look dumpy. She was eager for him to finish fixing the house once and for all. At the time, the property didn't even have electricity, therefore he had to run an electrical cord from his house across the front lawns of other people's homes and back into his house just so he could get some light. And if that wasn't enough to deal with, the work Roy did at his place soon began to directly affect Anne in her living conditions. He pulled out the gutters on his property, which led to a large amount of water damaging her home.
Oh, fuck.
You can't not have gutters, right? The final straw came during a heavy storm where water started pouring into Anne's bedroom.
Oh, shit.
From Roy's jacked up roof. Having spent so much time renovating her own house, Anne was just heartbroken at the extensive water damage caused to her property. The next day, Roy appeared and she confronted him. Unfortunately, this time he wasn't so nice to her, and things took a turn for the worse. Anne felt at this point she had no other option but to contact the housing authority and issue a formal complaint. She just wasn't getting through to Roy. The housing inspector came out the very next day and issued Roy several orders to work on the house for safety reasons. That was the same week that Anne saw her first rat nearby from a pile of trash sitting next door. So now rats are coming. Roy told her he had bought another property down the road, but for the life of her, Anne couldn't figure out why he would do that.
When he hasn't even finished this one.
Thank you. When he hasn't even finished it. Exactly. Wouldn't you just finish fixing up one house, then buy another one, right? I mean, that's logical. Let's do one project at a time. I know there are people who can multitask numerous projects that have the money to do it too, because you can hire subcontractors.
But this isn't Roy.
No, this isn't that situation. He's planning to do it all himself.
Does he have a job?
I don't think so. I don't know. It's unclear. After the last property purchase, Roy straight up ghosted the house next door to Anne. He disappeared. It was evident that any work that had been done on the house had just stopped abruptly. His negligence of the property caused its own issues. For example, the house just sitting there was bringing down the cost of the surrounding homes. Now it's like a piece of shit. I mean, it was bad in the beginning, but now it's even worse. So that was a problem. Roy just bit off more than he could chew. He didn't acquire the resources or the skills to complete these projects in multiple homes in any kind of timely fashion. The neighbors slowly began to turn their backs on him. I mean, remember they were all like, yes, he's the president.
The president of the steering committee.
He's got these great ideas. We love him. Well, that didn't last when shit just started falling apart.
Rats are all over.
Yeah, rats are all over. He was no longer playing an active role in the community and quickly became a thorn in their side. Instead of stepping up and actively working to be part of the solution, Roy went out of his way to not just be a part of the problem, but legit became the problem himself. Roy had ruffled so many feathers since his arrival into town, and neighbors had finally had enough of his bullshit. It didn't take long for the steering committee to demote Roy from the position of president in the neighborhood committee. Of course, Roy now felt that everyone was against him. He felt like they all turned on him, and he didn't take that news well at all. He felt like the neighborhood outcast, and as far as he was concerned, it was all Anne's fault.
Anne's fault.
He thought since everyone in the club supported her, that they would be quick to get rid of him when things soured. He didn't like that feeling of being ganged up on. All these deep, dark thoughts started lingering in his mind and made him anxious, agitated. I mean, he just started acting really weird. His behavior began to become very strange, concerning, and really hard to ignore. And to be honest, Roy was beginning to lose his mind. Things only managed to take a turn for the worse when Roy's house was vandalized in the middle of the night. Naturally, he blamed it on Anne.
Yeah, because that's what Anne's going to do.
Yeah, she can go out there and vandalize shit. There was an obvious shift in his behavior and personality. He had undergone some kind of change, like this did something to him. The way he looked at Anne was very dark, ominous, and borderline threatening. And the way he reacted toward her led her to become a bit terrified of him and his erratic behavior. She wasn't just scared of him either, but she was also really scared of what Roy may or may not be capable of doing to her and or her home. Eventually, Anne felt like she had no other choice but to make a complaint with the city's housing authority. As a result of this, Roy was faced with thousands of dollars in fines. I read one article and I think it was like $49,000.
Shit.
Yeah. At this point, it wasn't about just a few measly repairs on the house. The stakes had been raised, and this neighborhood rivalry changed from this day forward. Her friends and fellow neighbors warned her to be careful with Roy. Playing with him was like playing with fire. Anne didn't doubt this for a single second, as she herself found Roy to be a little off his rocker. As soon as Roy found out about the amount of money he was going to be forced to pay to the city, he lost it and totally snapped on Anne. He was enraged by the money he was going to owe.
Couldn't he just fix it up and then not have to pay the money?
Exactly, yeah.
That's what I'm thinking. Like, you're going to be
course.
fined if you don't do this.
Yes, and I'm sure they gave him some time. But Roy didn't. He didn't comply with the city's orders, so countless warnings and penalties were sent to the house and slowly piled up on his front porch. His debt became this looming darkness that towered over him constantly, and the shadow it cast was quickly to devour him whole. Roy definitely wasn't in a good place. The house deteriorated more and became nothing more than an obvious eyesore on the street. As time progressed, it was clear that Roy wasn't making any effort to work on the house, and it just was like he had given up and stopped working on these renovations altogether. Anne, again, was left with no other choice but to take legal action against him. The neighbors supported her in this. As I kind of mentioned before, their house prices were plummeting. Their house values were plummeting due to the derelict building on their block. So enough was enough as far as the whole neighborhood felt. The court case was a success. Several neighbors gave evidence that merely strengthened the already strong case that they had. The judge ordered Roy to pay fines and stated that the house most likely would need to be demolished. Anne felt really guilty about this.
It'd be better to have it demolished than this.
Yes.
Someone can just come and build one.
She didn't want to bankrupt Roy. She just wanted him to work on his damn house.
Right.
Plain and simple. However, this wasn't the end of the matter because Roy appealed the decision. Still, even before the appeal, a part of Anne believed that he would try and do some work on the house. Like maybe this will make him, finally. Ultimately, Anne was trying to give Roy the benefit of the doubt. She still held hopes for him that he would turn over a new leaf and begin his journey toward beautification once more. She wanted nothing more than to help him with this progress, but he wouldn't listen to anything she had to say.
Because he hates her.
He hates her. She even offered to buy his house.
Oh.
But he wasn't having any of it. The way he looked at her, he had this just crazy look in his eye, made her wonder if she should get a restraining order against him. After more than a year of tension, Roy had one last chance to plead his case in court. It was this appeal. Anne had gathered a lot of her evidence. She took photos of both of their houses, and other neighbors were supposed to appear. at this hearing. She just wanted it all to be over.
How much time has passed?
I think it's probably been close to 2 years.
Okay.
And this is now 1997, so it was around 1995 when this all began. The day before the appeal, Roy turned up at the house, the one he bought, for the first time since the court case, and could hear him knocking down walls and things of that nature. It sounded like he was working in the basement, but aside from this quick observation, Anne chose to ignore the noise he was making next door, and she tried to relax herself by sitting down at the piano. Anne would often lose herself in these moments, lose herself in the music. The world would just fall away as she played. It was kind of like her anxiety relief.
Cathartic.
Yes. Once her nerves were calm, she decided it was time to turn in for the night. She went upstairs and began her nightly routine before getting into bed. She went to her bathroom where she washed her face, brushed her teeth, and thought to herself while looking in the mirror before her. At first, she was a little concerned about all the noise coming from next door, but she quickly convinced herself that the only thing she needed at the moment was a good night rest before her big day in court the following morning. No matter how much noise Roy made throughout the night, Anne tried her best to just simply ignore it. She walked down the hallway toward her bedroom, and the moment she stepped foot inside, she was hit on the back of the head. Anne would never make it to the courthouse next day, and neither, for that matter, would Roy.
Oh, shit.
And before I tell you more, we're going to take a break. The following morning, March 25th, 1997, Anne's neighbors arrived at her house around 8:30 a.m. to pick her up for court as they had previously arranged. However, they received no response every time they knocked on her front door. Her neighbors thought this was really odd.
Yeah, because you think she'd be ready for that court.
Right. But they figured that maybe she decided to go earlier and that she was already at the courthouse, waiting for everyone to arrive. However, when they got to the courthouse, there was no sign of Anne or Roy. When the judge appeared, she was shocked to see that neither party had turned up. Finally, one of the neighbors stood up and expressed her concern about Anne not answering the door that morning. Consequently, the judge ordered the police to investigate. The police arrived at Anne's house, finding all the doors were locked, but an officer was assisted by a neighbor who helped locate Anne's spare key. Once inside, they noticed that Anne's keys, purse, wallet, shoes, and her court documents were lying on a hallway table. Everything was ready to go for that morning, which also seemed pretty weird that none of it had been disturbed. While searching upstairs, police didn't find anyone present, definitely not Anne. However, they did find something else interesting. Police found a small spot of blood near the bathroom and nothing more. One of her neighbors suggested that the police officers continue their search by looking inside the next door neighbor's house.
Roy's?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, shit.
And that's exactly what they ended up doing. And remember, the house does not have any electricity, so without any electricity, police are navigating through this rundown, dilapidated home of Roy's with flashlights in tow and trying their best not to fall through the countless holes in the floor. I mean, I can only imagine.
Oh, yeah.
As they searched around, they came upon a number of cages.
Cages?
Yeah, some with animals in them.
What?
Some that had already been dead for a long period of time.
What?
I know, it's fucking weird. As for the dead animals that had been left to die in the home, these poor animals were covered in maggots crawling over every inch of their body.
What kind of animals did he have? Dogs?
I don't know.
He had animals
in cages. Suddenly, I know, it's fucking weird. Suddenly, Roy popped out of nowhere, startling the police officers. When they began asking him a few questions, Roy looked back at the cops as if he was looking straight through them. It was like there was no one home upstairs with Roy. When they asked him why he hadn't been to court that day...
And what about these cages?
Yeah, and what about these cages? Roy responded by saying, quote, "because I was going to lose," end quote. As they led him out the front door, Roy could be heard saying, quote, "you don't want to go in there, officers. end quote. That seems pretty ominous, right? Roy just seemed off in a big way. His appearance really brought some unwanted attention from the neighbors and the police. He stood there with no socks or shoes on, and his feet were all bloody. Every last bit of his exposed skin was covered in dirt and blood.
Oh, nasty.
I know. He was dressed in a pair of dirty trousers.
He fucking lost it.
Yeah, he lost it. And the trousers were held up with a belt. They were too big for his body. I mean, he must have lost weight since he had bought them. So he's got this belt on with these big old dirty, nasty pants. After Roy was ushered out of the residence, police were able to continue their search of the rest of the house. They had cleared most of the house except for the basement.
Oh, the basement.
The basement, which police officers were slowly making their way toward. One of the officers went to the basement with a flashlight in one hand and a gun in the other. He took note of a horrible hissing. And what he found was a hungry python about 8 to 10 feet long, at least, that was in a bathtub down there.
No fucking way.
I know. Isn't that strange?
No fucking way.
What the hell? I'd be like, what the fuck?
What the fuck? He warned them, you don't want to go down. You don't want to go in there.
How does it stay in the bathtub?
I don't
Python
know.
could get out if it's that big.
I don't know. I don't understand any of this.
The police noticed there was an extension cord that ran from the back of the house and went through the kitchen and down the basement steps, so they followed the cord. It obviously was plugged into something that lit up the basement. And in the basement, there were even more cages of dead animals. I mean, what the fuck? The officers recalled the air in the basement smelled like meat, almost like what a butcher shop would smell like.
Oh.
To me, that smells like blood. I don't know.
It smells nasty. It just smells nasty ass. That's what it smells, nasty ass.
There were industrial lights set up all over the place, and the officer noticed out of the corner of his eye that there was a mannequin propped up in the corner.
Oh, mannequin.
The mannequin didn't have any arms or legs.
Oh, God.
And then the police officer saw it. He spotted a hole that was big enough for a man to crawl through. As he investigated further, he went through the hole himself, and it wasn't long before he realized that this hole was actually a full-blown tunnel, and it led somewhere. And that somewhere was right next door and straight into Ann Hoover's house. Isn't that freaky?
Fuck.
It was a tunnel.
Wow.
Apparently.
That's like a movie.
I know, right? This is like the Shawshank Redemption when he made that tunnel, right? Only this is much shorter distance. Apparently, Roy was able... Oh, yeah, spoiler alert. If you haven't seen Shawshank Redemption. Apparently, Roy was able to tunnel into her house without her knowing. No power tools were used. And honestly, who knows how long it took him to dig this? Evidence showed that Roy entered Ann's house and knocked her unconscious. He then dragged her unconscious body back through the tunnel and into his basement. Once he was back in the comfort of his own home, Roy then strangled her with the electrical cable before he used a power saw and a handsaw to dismember Ann's body.
What? Why?
Because he's nuts.
Feed it to the python?
Oh my God. God, I hope not.
Well, I'm just sorry.
I know.
I'm just thinking out loud.
He cut the torso in half and then removed her arms and legs and hands.
Poor Ann.
I know. The pieces he intended to dispose of were placed in trash bags. So there were trash bags with Ann's, unfortunately, dismembered bodies in it. And the police believe, like, when they came over there, they had interrupted him.
Oh, that's why he's all covered in blood and dirt.
So this was when the police officer realized that the mannequin that he spotted wasn't a mannequin.
It's never a mannequin.
It's never a mannequin.
Stop.
It's actually poor Ann Hoover. They immediately arrested Roy, and after a struggle, placed him in the police van. Roy kept screaming, flailing his legs, and just making a scene in general. Neighbors heard him yelling, quote, "Just kill me now, get it over with," end quote. Police took Roy to the local police station for formal questioning and charging. And it's like a police van. It wasn't a cruiser. Okay, so they put him in the back of this van. And when police opened the door to the van to let him out, they found that he had hung himself from the top of the police cage
What?
in the back of the van using his belt. I know. Even though he was handcuffed, he somehow managed to get his belt out of his pants, wrap it around his neck, and get it through the cage located behind where he was sitting, and he successfully hung himself.
What the
Mhm.
fuck?
In one article, it said it was a 12-minute drive, and the other one said it was a 30-minute drive. I guess it doesn't matter, but
It was enough to do the job.
it was enough to do the job. An officer said later, quote, Roy apparently pulled on his belt until the buckle slid over to his hands, at which point he undid the belt and pulled it through the loops. Once the belt was free, he slipped the loop through the buckle again and tied the free end to a steel grating in the back of the van. Then he just slipped his head through the loop, leaned forward, and his own weight was enough to strangle and kill him. End quote. While most were shocked by what Roy had pulled off, the coroner believed that the 28-year-old was flexible and agile enough to do exactly what he did. Even more impressive is that he managed to pull this all off without the officers realizing
I know.
it.
I was just thinking that.
I mean, there wasn't a lot of commotion, and there was a window that they could have looked through at any time. But they never looked back because supposedly they never heard anything.
Okay.
She was very quiet as well. Anne always had faith in her community and felt it could be so much more than it was. As a result, on June 1st, 2002, on what would have been Anne's 50th birthday, the community gathered together to honor her. In her memory, many friends, relatives, and neighbors dedicated a small park at the corner of Jefferson Drive and County Lane and named it the Anne Allison Hoover Memorial Park. And I got a link where you can see pictures. This beautiful piece of land is dedicated to her memory while also serving as part of the community, that people could come and visit. The two houses that Roy and Anne lived in were eventually both bought and renovated, and now two new families live there peacefully. However, it's still unclear whether either of these families know the history of their homes and
Hope they close that tunnel.
Oh man, and the horrific incident of a neighborhood dispute that went terribly wrong, claiming the lives of two people. What started out as a simple leaky roof took a turn for the worse and ended in this horrible tragedy.
So fucked up.
So fucked up.
He dug a tunnel
I know.
and dismembered her, and he had animals in cages. What was he doing?
What was he doing? I know. I'd like to know. And you talk about closing up the hole in the basement. As I was researching, I found a Facebook page that posted about this. And someone in the comments, I mean, I don't know if it's true or not, but someone in the comments said that they lived in the house after this happened and that there was like a place in the basement where you could tell where the hole was.
Oh.
Yeah, but it had been filled up or boarded up or whatever. However you fix it. I'm sure it had to be filled with dirt. And what the hell did he do with the dirt?
Well, I mean, the whole thing was a mess. So
I know, isn't it crazy?
it's so crazy.
I mean, he had to like get through a cement wall and
Wow.
a couple cement walls.
Seriously, this is like a movie.
I know. It was wild. So that is my horrific story of the murder and dismemberment of Anne
Poor
Hoover.
Anne. She was just an amazing person, too.
I know. And she just wanted to have a beautiful neighborhood.
What the hell
I mean,
happened
all
to
of us-
Roy?
Right. All of us want that.
Well, you just said you didn't really care.
Well,
earlier.
I mean, I want a nice
Just
neighborhood,
teasing. Poor Anne, man.
Poor Anne. So if you would like to see some photos
Oh, wow.
or follow that link to the beautiful Anne Allison Hoover Memorial Park, you can find that in the show notes. You can go to our website, crimesandconsequences.com. You can also find us on social media
Yep.
at Hardcore True Crime
Yep.
on Facebook and Instagram. And also, if you're interested in becoming one of our Apple members, our Patreon members, and that means you get extra episodes that we don't release to the public. We release one a week, along with our regular free episodes. You can go to patreon.com/TNTcrimes and find out information about that.
Or just subscribe on Apple.
Or just subscribe on Apple, like Talia just said. And if you're looking for some holiday gifts, maybe some last minute, I don't know about shipping, but you can find links to our merch on our website as well.
Well, thanks, Tonya.
Yeah.
That's
Anything else,
that is
Talia?
a crazy story. No.
I know, it's messed up, right? I just can't believe it. So,
wow.
anyway.
Damn.
I know. Poor Ann.
Man, he's digging a tunnel. He had a plan.
He, lost his mind.
Yeah.
And why did he have animals in the cages?
I don't know, but I feel like if it was a bunch of dogs, she probably would have heard them barking.
Yeah, you're right. So maybe it was...
I don't know what he was doing.
He had a python.
Yeah, what the hell?
Did he have, squirrels or... I don't know.
More snakes? I don't know.
I don't know. Mice?
Mice in a cage.
I don't
Rats?
know. Rats? I don't know.
I don't know.
Anyway, until our next episode.
Don't kill each other.
Please.
Bye.